Hello. August 14th, I started experiencing some symptoms that were odd. My right foot developed some weakness and meant that I was unable to control it hitting the ground harder than I would have liked when I was walking. On the same day, I tried lifting my hands above my head and couldn't, despite all my effort, make it above the shoulders. When going upstairs a little bit later that day, the knees just didn't feel right. They felt shaky, weak, and unstable. And to test everything out, I tried doing a little jog across the parking lot and stumbled as soon as I went faster than a walk. By the next morning, Friday, August 15th, I was struggling to grip anything with my fingers. Getting dressed that morning, socks, shorts, t-shirt, took almost every ounce of strength and effort that I had in order to get them on. Despite this, I was able to drive myself and see my kids that morning, but I walked in the door and everybody could tell I didn't look that great. Before too long, around lunchtime or just after, I was taken to the hospital where they admitted me. I was suffering from more and more weakness in different parts of my body, specifically my legs and my arms. They did a CAT scan, a spinal tap, and an MRI, all on that same day. The early thoughts were that it was Guillain-Barre syndrome, or GBS. Thankfully, despite some of the signs through the test results not showing themselves, the doctors did take it seriously and started treating me for GBS. You take an immunosuppressant that is designed to stop the immune system from working and attacking the nervous system in the body, therefore creating the weakness. Thankfully, that treatment stabilized all of the symptoms, but not before I could no longer walk or use my arms or hands in any way. Those symptoms had started 48 hours after the initial ones. That's how quickly this can decline. So I had gone from Thursday working a full day, pretty much able to do anything, to now being entirely dependent on nursing staff and other people in general for everything, including bathroom use, eating, moving, doing anything. I was in the hospital for a week. Thankfully, the treatment stabilized the conditions and even started creating little flickers of improvement. I noticed I was able to move my left foot. Thankfully, I was able to move my head and move my back for the entire time. Both my neck and my back have been largely unaffected. There was a small scare in the first few days where they were concerned about my swallowing. So they put me on a full liquid diet or thickened liquids diet and got me into the ICU, where thankfully the concerns were allayed within 24 hours. The danger is, though, with this condition is that it can affect everything and you can be completely paralyzed, including muscle weakening to the point where you can no longer swallow, breathe, shut your eyes, or move anything. Of course, the breathing and the swallowing are the two big concerns in terms of immediate health risk, which is why they moved me to the ICU. I was able to move back to regular food pretty soon after that, but I did get weakness through my throat muscles and my vocal cords. meaning the only way I could talk was through my diaphragm. And I started getting weakness on the left side of my face, to the point where no matter how hard I tried, I could not screw it up like this. I could not use that side of my mouth. My top lip got weak entirely. It was completely useless, and I couldn't shut my eyes all the way. I was able to just about get them to there, but I could not tighten them shut. Because of the weakness down the left side of my face, my speech went all funky. As soon as they realized in the hospital that I was out of medical danger, they did find me a place in the rehab hospital. And I did move there basically as soon as I got the chance to. I was still entirely dependent on nursing staff to do everything. Whilst in the hospital, if I had needed to urinate, I had weakness through the muscles and the nervous system down in that area, and so was unable to go. And I couldn't be taken to the bathroom either because it was too dangerous to move me. So they had to straight cath me multiple times a day in order to empty my bladder. Thankfully, when they moved me to the rehab hospital, they put in a Foley catheter which sat in there permanently and made sure I didn't have to think about going. Once in the rehab hospital, I genuinely did expect that I would improve fast. I thought I would be there maybe 4 to 6 weeks, and then I would be able to walk out there, albeit with maybe some struggle, but be able to walk out of there. And it was once I got through the first few weeks of rehab, doing 3 hours of therapy a day, that I realized that was probably not going to be the case. This can be a very long journey for some people. Some get independent living back within a few weeks. Others it can take several months, and others it can take a year plus. There doesn't seem to be any correlation between being fit and healthy going in or not. In fact, some would say that the fitter you are, the healthier you are, the longer it can take because your peak of recovery is so much further than the average person. So whereas some people might be okay with independent living, but with some restrictions, that's not enough for the average fit and healthy person who wants to get back to being fully independent and able to excel physically in everything that they do. Rehab hospital was very good for me in many ways because it forced me to do the therapy every day. It meant that I had 24/7 around-the-clock care and that there were always people there. Now, I was unable to use my hands to press anything, including an emergency button, and so they had to find a soft touch, almost like the strength of a computer mouse button for me to touch. I used my left foot in the first few days. Unfortunately, with it being down by my foot, the cord got overextended and the connection on the pad didn't reach. And one particular night, in a huge amount of pain, I was pressing the call button, trying to get someone in to relieve the pain, and no one was coming. And I ended up lying in bed screaming for close to an hour before finally realizing that I had to do something different. And the desperate side of myself decided the only way I could get attention would be to set off the bed alarm by escaping the bed. And even now, in the state of strength that I am in now, doing that would be a risk. Doing it back then, where I had no leg strength, no arm strength, and really no strength at all, would have been catastrophic if I had succeeded. Thankfully, I got wedged trying to get off the bed, so I had one foot on the floor, one leg half off the bed, my body on the bed and my head bent into an awful position on the opposite corner of the bed. Just had to keep screaming and screaming until somebody finally came in and got me out of that position. If I had fallen, I would have smashed my head on wall, floor, and who knows what else. After that, they did move me closer to the nurse's desk so that if I did need help, I could call. The weird thing about this condition is that you don't experience a huge amount of pain, not all the time. You experience weird, weak sensations where you feel like you should be able to do something and you go and try and nothing happens. It's not painful. It's not pins and needles. It's just nothing. The pain I did experience was particularly bad in the first 2 weeks in the rehab hospital and in the week in the hospital I had first. My legs would get this nerve pain from the hips all the way down into the feet. That was excruciating. And I would press the call bell because I couldn't move them in order to get someone to come in and bend my legs up to relieve the pain, which they would do. Then they would leave, and 15 minutes later I was in excruciating pain again and needed them to straighten them out. I did have the one nurse eventually tell me around 4 o'clock in the morning that you can't keep ringing the call bell because we have other patients. And it is then when you feel genuinely vulnerable and isolated and helpless, because no matter what you want to do, you can't do it. And without other people's help, you lie there with your own thoughts, with the pain, with the discomfort, with what can quickly feel like hopelessness. Thankfully, I didn't have another really distressing event like that, getting stuck or without being heard. But that nerve pain happened every night, all night, for the first 3 weeks. I was told it was a good thing, that it was the nerves starting to fire up again. And I think it was proof that that was the case, because my legs have been the things that have been the most forward-thinking, the most positive. My left leg returned first, to the point where I could, lying back on my back, I could bend my leg up towards my chest, and then before too long I was able to kick it around, push off of it to shift myself, and then with that kind of movement and with the right leg not too far behind, I was able to start turning myself in bed to try and alleviate some of the discomfort with my back or my neck. Once I started turning by myself, about a month in, I was on my side every night going to sleep. It was the most amazing thing to not lie there awake on my back for hours on end, and to be able to have some kind of control over how I moved. Around 6 weeks into my stay, I was sent to get more of the IV treatment to try and kickstart the arms a little bit more, as they hadn't really made a huge amount of improvement outside of my fingers moving a little bit, and that was weak movement. No pressure could be applied. I was set up for 3 infusions after I'd taken 7 in my week at the hospital in the first week. So on the Monday, I went to get an infusion, and I was scheduled for another one on the Tuesday and another one on the Wednesday. On the Tuesday morning, they got me up at 7 a.m. to take a shower. I got up out of bed and wheeled into the bathroom in the wheelchair. And I was fortunate with the wheelchair that I had, because it had full back support and a headrest. And it had a tilt system, which meant that I could be tilted back and not have to worry about falling out forward, which hadn't been a problem anyway, because my back had always been strong. But that morning, wheeled into the bathroom in the wheelchair with my knees above my hips with the tilt, I felt horribly nauseous. Asked the therapist to get a bowl or a basin, which she did. I ended up not needing it, and because of the concern around how I was feeling, she quickly left to get a blood pressure cuff. As soon as she walked out the bathroom door, I felt more lightheaded than I've ever felt in my life. My entire body went into some weird, dazed kind of situation. And all I can remember is pressing my head back against the headrest, just hoping it would fade. And the very next memory I have, I'm lying on my front on the bathroom floor, the tiled bathroom floor, head like looking to the right, fully stretched out. And I remember opening my eyes and looking down to my left where the ground was and just seeing this pool of blood growing and growing and growing. No one quite understands how I managed to fall face forward out of the wheelchair in that position. But it happened. Whether I lurched forward because of the lightheadedness and don't remember, whether I passed out in the wheelchair and then my head weight had just carried me, I don't know. But I fell. And that lovely scar there above my left eyebrow, the Y shape, that's the remnants of that fall. I spent the morning in the ER because of that. They glued the cut together, did a pretty good job considering it was only about three and a half weeks ago. And it remained a mystery for the entire time, with many jokes being made out of it. And obviously it was serious at the time, because that's the worst nightmare for anybody, is for a patient to fall out of a wheelchair. They had to get a big shower net and hoist me off the floor. They called an ambulance to come and get me. They laid me back in the bed waiting for them to come in. I'm lying on my back, totally awake, feel totally with it. The EMS team come in, and there's one lady that walks in, she says, "What were you doing?" And I looked her right in the eye and I said, "Diving practice." And I felt remarkably relaxed after that point because I knew my brain was working. They tested me, no concussion symptoms, no brain bleed, nothing. And I checked myself the rest of the day, the next day, the day after that for bruising anywhere else. Front of the shoulders, collarbone, sternum, hips, pelvis, knees, anything. No bruises. It was like I had gone so limp, I'd actually saved myself somehow a fall. And to come out with that little damage was quite miraculous. And needless to say, I went back for an infusion the next day and the day after that. So I got my 3 infusions and then waited with therapy to see if things would improve. However, it was the week after that where I was weighed for the first time in 3 weeks, which was not the correct protocol or procedure. With my size pre-condition and the knowledge that GBS patients will lose weight inevitably because of the muscle atrophy, and the knowledge that I hadn't been eating as much as I should have been doing because of different things, the fall and the infusions and the meal quality being very poor, there should have been more anticipation or proactivity in making sure that my weight didn't drop. So mid-September, I weighed about 125 pounds, which was 20 pounds less than my normal weight pre-condition. But in about 3 weeks, I had dropped a further 15 pounds down to about 111. And in all fairness, I looked like a starving inmate of a concentration camp. I remember looking in the mirror after a shower at one point and being horrified. And everybody there was horrified too. And there was a full meal plan put in place and a weight gaining program put in place to try and get me away from having to be sent back to hospital because of the concern over the weight. I am fairly convinced that the malnutrition and the lack of energy that stopped me from being able to do a lot of the therapy and from being able to sleep properly and eat properly, I think did set me back 2 to 3 weeks in my improvement. But I got through that, and through eating the equivalent of about 4 to 5 meals of food a day, through a huge amount of help from friends, work colleagues, family, I did see the energy come back. It was shortly after that that they gave me a discharge date, which had never been mentioned before. So they basically gave me 2 weeks to gain as much weight as possible and to figure out where I was going to go after being discharged. And usually you get discharged and you go home and you organize some kind of aftercare and you go to outpatient therapy, and that's kind of how it works. But with the situation being what it is, and I was going to have to figure out somebody to be there as a caregiver. I was going to have to figure out someone to make a minimum of 3 meals a day and feed them to me. I was going to have to figure out rides to outpatient therapy or have someone come to my home, but there were a huge amount of logistics that needed figured out. And it was shortly after that that my parents suggested and that I could travel back to the UK and live with them for a period of time and get all the care, all the nutrition that I needed in order to make the best and fastest possible recovery. And so last week, a week ago today, I was discharged from the rehab hospital. I did not walk out the door like I was always hoping I would. But we drove down to Philadelphia. My dad flew over from the UK and drove me to Philadelphia, where we got a hotel, and I had a passport meeting with the passport office the next morning to get my US passport, and then the Wednesday evening. Flew from Philadelphia to London, about 7 hours, and then had a 4-hour drive to the south of Wales where my parents' house is. So I'd been here almost a week, and there has already been improvement, regained energy, regained strength. I had been pushing for 30 to 40 feet of unassisted walking during therapies at the rehab hospital, and I did back-to-back walks totaling 100 feet last night. I've started noticing things about my arms, being able to reach out a little easier, fingers and hands and elbows starting to be able to do a little bit more. It's one of the things you don't think about with something until you experience something like this, how much we rely on our hands just for comfort alone. And just think about your face. You have an itch, you scratch the itch. I couldn't scratch an itch for 6 weeks. I couldn't touch my hair. I couldn't brush my teeth. I couldn't do anything. And you can tell nurses all you want what you need, but they change twice a day, and you have to keep telling people what you need. Ultimately, I'm not sure how long it will take until I am able to class myself as fully independent. My hope is that I will be able to return to the USA before Christmas at some point. We'll see how the timeline goes. But based on the care that I am getting here, I have high hopes for something like that. I basically want to be able to fly back to the USA solo without needing to be concerned about falling, without needing someone else to feed me, without needing help using the bathroom. And I do believe that those things can happen over the next several weeks. You experience a lot of emotions when something life-changing like this occurs, because you value your independence, you value your ability to be able to do things, and suddenly it's all taken away from you and you're relying on people you don't know to take care of you. And nurses, for all of their qualities, and there are so many really good ones out there, there are also ones that don't care. And when you are so dependent, the ones that don't care really, really do make it hard for you. There have been periods of time where I have felt very positive, have been able to make jokes, have been able to enjoy being myself and showing my personality. But there have been days where I have lost all of that, have had no energy, have had virtually no hope, and have felt very, very alone and angry. But in many ways that I am fortunate, because this could have been worse. I have met people who it's been worse for. People that have been unable to breathe without a ventilator, have been unable to swallow without a feeding tube, have been weeks in a hospital without being able to do almost anything. I've been able to breathe the whole time. I've been able to eat the whole time. I've been able to talk the whole time. And as I mentioned earlier, with the left side of my face and the speech, I did speech therapy at the rehab hospital for 2 weeks, and the entire face, the throat muscles, the lip, it all got better. It went from being felt really serious to within 2 to 3 days being absolutely fine. Everything else takes a little bit longer than that, at least at this point. It comes down to the fact of you don't take anything for granted anymore. The fact that I can sit up and have someone do a shower for me, that I can sit on a toilet, that I can sit up on the edge of the bed like this and do a video, that I can use a phone, albeit with voice command and or my nose, depending on where I'm sat, is miraculous in of itself. I am very grateful to be where I am now and being able to recover in this way. And as much as it was difficult to leave the US, this was probably the best case scenario, and it's not something that at my stage of life you ever expect the chance to be able to do, where you basically just focus on making every single part of yourself healthier. And knowing that ultimately people recover from this. They all do. Some less so than others, but the large majority make a full recovery. And are able to go back to doing all the things they were able to do before. It's just something like this happens, you don't come out of it the same. You're always going to be different. And so the different me is going to take nothing for granted anymore, even if it's picking my own nose. And you make sure that your immune system is at its very best all the time and make choices to back that up. And you make yourself stronger than you were before. And if you ever need any motivation day to day, you think back to where you were when you couldn't move anything, where you were completely and utterly dependent on everything with somebody else, from somebody else. And the fact that for the most part, every single day, you get closer to recovery and the better it will get. I'm not sure exactly how long it will take, but there is too much hope to waste time feeling discouraged. Things will be fine, and I will be able to go back to work, both jobs, gradually, bit by bit. I'll be able to play with my kids again. I'll be able to drive and to just do things in order to live. I have been very, very blessed by many, many people during this time. My kids have been very positive. Their mom has been very positive. I have friends from both jobs that have never let me forget that they care and they support and that I matter and have value. Because there is one thing that this condition really does strip away from you for a while, is your value. You can't provide for anyone else or yourself. You can't do anything. So what value do you have? Your value is in recovering. And if recovery is still in progress, it's a hard thing to focus on. But it will happen. And they'll reach a point a little further down the line where I have to return to videos like this and pictures from several weeks ago to remind myself exactly where I was and what I was unable to do. Because life continues, and once you get strong again, you tend to forget. And I don't think I'll ever forget this. But the important point is to not just take life for granted. If you did make it through this whole video and you do want to support in any way, please feel free. Any message, any text, any connection through social media has never been turned away. I don't tire of telling this story. There is financial needs. Going without work for what will probably be upwards of 4 months. If there is something you want to give, thank you. Let me know. I am grateful for the giving that has already happened. It has blown my mind what the generosity of people is. And ultimately, I thank each and every one of you for connecting with me and not leaving me. Because that has been the number one reason why I am getting through this. And why I will come out the other side stronger rather than weaker. If you know of anyone else that has had Guillain-Barre, I would love to hear about that story or who that person was, if it's not a private story. This condition affects about 1 in 100,000 people, but it does affect people, and it has affected more than I think we realize. And considering what it is, I think there's plenty of research to be done in why it happens and how it can be prevented. So feel free, reach out, let me know. I thank each one of you, and I appreciate each one of you.